If you want to learn how to install RallyArmor Mudflaps on your Subaru Forester Wilderness Edition, this is the video for you. Let's get into it. The tools you'll need for this install are pretty straightforward. You will need an 11mm wrench, a Phillips head screwdriver, a trim tool or flathead screwdriver, and a cleaner. Just make sure it is safe for automotive plastics. It doesn't necessarily need to be the one that I've picked. Now, if you have the OEM splash guards, you will need to remove them like I am here. If not, you'll just have trim clips, but you want to remove a trim clip up top, a 8mm bolt or 5/16. I'm using a 5/16 socket here to remove it, and there is another trim clip that you need to remove underneath as well. Next, we want to remove this trim clip that's at the corner of the rear bumper. We're going to replace it with this white clip that comes in your kit. It's going to go underneath the rear bumper and into the fender liner there. Then we want to take one of these smaller brackets, specifically the one that has the tab on the right and the stud on the left. Then you're going to slide the bracket underneath the bumper but on top of the white clip. Then we'll take one of these shorter screws with a washer and we will start threading it into our white clip using our Phillips head screwdriver. And we'll screw it down until it is nice and tight. And that bracket isn't going to go anywhere. I did forget to remove this little clip from the OEM splash guard, so make sure to remove that if you have it. Then we're going to put on our RallyArmor clips, which are a lot more heavier duty. We're going to put one on that lower hole on the rear bumper, and then another one right above it. Now we're going to put on our rear mud flap, which is the wider mud flap. We're going to put it on the stud first, and then we'll put a washer over it, and then the locking nut. We'll thread that on just a little bit to start. Once we've done that, we can tighten it down a little bit with our 11mm, but we're not going to tighten it all the way. Then we'll take another short screw and a washer, and we will put it in our first clip, which is down the bottom there, and start that in a little bit by hand. And then we'll do the same to the top as well, with again a short screw and washer. Then we'll use our Phillips head screwdriver to tighten our screws. We're not going to tighten them all the way though. We want to leave them a little bit loose. After we're done with that, we're going to align the mud flap. So you want to align it so it's pretty much perpendicular with the ground. My driveway is not flat, so it is a little difficult, but once you have it aligned and check it, you can tighten down everything, the bolts, and then of course the two screws. And once we have tightened everything down, we will give our mud flap a quick test to make sure it's not going to fall off, and our rear mud flap is done. Now we'll move on to the front, which is a lot easier to do if we turn the wheel towards the direction we're going to work on. Then I will remove the OEM splash guard again with 3 8mm bolts, and then there's also a trim clip underneath as well. Then I'll remove this trim clip up on the fender liner. That should be there for you. If you don't have the OEM splash guards, instead of the 3 screws, there will be 3 trim clips in addition to the one we removed already. Then I'm going to remove the old clips to get ready for the install of the RallyArmor mud flap. Next, we'll put on our clips for our screws. That top one is going to go underneath the fender flare onto the body only. The other two will go onto the fender flare itself. And then we could put that upper trim clip back in from before that we removed. Now we're going to prep our fender liner for our foam spacers. These are adhesive, so we want to give it the cleanest area possible. We're going to use our cleaner and a rag or paper towel and wipe these spots clean. We want to get all 3 of those holes that the trim clips used to be on, and then right above the top hole we need to wipe down as well. Now I don't know who came up with the idea for these foam spacers, but they are honestly horrible. You cannot get the backs in these off without taking off some of the foam and losing all the adhesion. I just did the best I could. It's 50-50. Sometimes it'll work, sometimes it won't. This larger foam piece though, the backer comes off no problem, and we're gonna stick that one right on. Don't worry though, you can still use the other spacers, you just can't stick them on. Now we're going to grab one of our large brackets, and what we want to do is sort of shape it to our wheel well. You can bend it super easily, it's not very thick metal, and you just want to shape it to fit into that wheel arch. You may have to bend it a little more, unbend it a bit until it fits perfect, just like that. Next we want to put our mud flap on, we're going to grab the skinnier mud flap, put the bracket stud through the mud flap, and then put on a washer and a locking nut. This will be easiest than trying to do it on the car. It helps kind of keep the bracket in place while you're putting in the other screws. Now we're going to take one of our long screws and a washer, put the washer on the long screw, then we'll feed it through the mud flap and the bracket through the top hole, and then put our foam spacer on top of that if you couldn't get yours stuck on. Then we'll start threading in the screw a little bit to get it secure. We'll do the same for the next screw down, putting a screw through the washer, through the mud flap, through the bracket, and then through a spacer. And then on the bottom, we won't have a bracket, so it'll just be the screw, washer, mud flap, then spacer. Then you could take your Phillips head screwdriver and tighten down all of these screws. Just don't tighten them down all the way because we need to make sure our mud flap is aligned. After it's aligned, you can tighten down the screws the rest of the way. Don't make them too tight because you don't want to warp the mud flap at all. Just try and keep it nice and flat, but still nice and snug. You can see there I had to go back and loosen the screw just a little bit on the bottom. Lastly, you can use your 11mm wrench or socket to tighten down the locking nut up top, but just don't tighten it down too much. Make it just snug enough. And then the front mud flap is done. And of course, once you're done the driver's side, you're going to do the same thing you did for both of those mud flaps to the passenger side. It is mirrored, but it's the same process overall. And that completes the installation process for this first generation Forester Wilderness Edition. If you want to see more installs on this vehicle, you can click right over there. And if you want to know what's under this green tarp behind me, you want to subscribe because you're going to find out exactly what that is in January. So I'll see you then.